welcome to the Environment Committee. If you can be seated as possible. Okay, got the minutes in front of me of the previous meeting. Whereas I quite well remember the whole meeting, can I agree the minutes? Thank you. Okay, absence of members. Thank you. 3 declarations of members of community interest. I'll start off. I have a potential pecuniary interest in item 11, and therefore I will not take part in the discussion. I will leave the room. And I just also under item 6, under the members item reporting regarding members' permit, although I don't have a current permit, I might have to leave whether that's in the interest, and if some members do have a permit in place now.
I have one, Chairman, and I'm going to keep it.
Likewise.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to that item, all members are entitled to a permit. At full council on the 15th of July, there are a number of dispensations agreed, and one of which would allow members to participate in this matter, and that relates to matters about an allowance from expense payment for payment to the council. So, I believe that all members
Well, just wanted to make the point that we don't accept that any council should have a dispensation from voting on pecuniary interest. This item is about scrapping members' parking permits, and it's totally wrong that members who take advantage of those permits are allowed to vote on whether or not they should be scrapped. And I'd also like to make the declaration that I do not have such a permit.
Councillor Sandra.
I do have one that I would declare that I'm just going to rely on the staying talking about. I also have to declare on item 11, I have checked this with Mary Ellen Salter. My house is within walking distance of what will be, what might be the new crossroads station, as is my daughter's house, as is another house that I own in Enfield. She has said that whilst I should declare it, it doesn't constitute a pecuniary interest. And she says it will be perfectly possible to stay.
Thank you. Harriet.
Thank you. I'd like to declare in relation to item 6 a non-pecuniary interest that I have my interest recorded, please, that I do not have a parking permit. I am with other Labour councillors who refuse to have one, and it's unfair to take those when they're non-residents are not allowed to park in the space.
Okay. Find that report.
I would like to declare one too.
Okay.
I declare the same pecuniary interest. Pardon? And could my name please be recorded when this isn't working? Oh yes, it is now.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. It isn't working now.
Councillor Cannell.
I have a council's parking permit which I do use on occasion, so I would declare on their interest. Yes.
And you switch to my card as well.
Exactly the same as council's Kelly. And I use it so rarely.
Maybe I'll get council tax.
Can
you speak in the microphone?
Supposed to be used, which is purely one of our council business.
Thank you.
Okay. Right.
Before I go on to the next item, I think So Councillor Martin Carrick with this item. So with the committee's permission, I'd like to move the order of business that item 11 is discussed first, and then followed by the members' items, and then public questions. Because public questions are mainly related to the parking policy, so it would be good to have a follow-on there. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay.
Item 11 is the consultation on Crossroad 2. Mr. Moore, this is your report.
Indeed.
You want to introduce it?
Okay. Last year there was a consultation about Crossroad 2, and at that point in time, Bugle were consulting on Crossroad 2 terminating at Alexandra Palace. As a result of the responses to that, including one from Barnet, the decision was made to consult further about extending Crossroad 2 proposal beyond Alexandra Palace and now consulting on it terminating at New Southgate, which would connect that area of Barnet up with the whole bit of London across to Victoria and then down to Clapham. So essentially, there's a series of questions that impact on Barnet, which are in the appendix. The key question is, does the council support an extension of Crossroad 2 to New Southgate?
Councillor Hart.
My question is, I don't know that area at all, and Crossroads is something I see on the television. I was watching the drilling on TV yesterday, I think.
Microphone, please.
Sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah, I was watching this on the television. Will this be part of Crossroads? Will it be overland, or will it be yet another expensive town?
The information we have at the moment, but it will be an underground, but it will come above ground at New Southgate.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully support the draft response, but I think that it's something that we will need to look very carefully at the infrastructure, that the repercussions of any redevelopments around New Southgate Station, the great pressure on the road system, which is already very, very heavily stretched, and that we can't bury our heads in the sand that there's going to be implications. But having said that, I very much support it.
Any other comments?
Yes, there may be a development at the North London Business Park at some time in the future. When they're doing this, putting it in at the end of the stadium yards, we could have a station by the North London Business Park. At the moment, the station that they're putting is going to be south of the existing New Southgate station.
That's right. I don't think the proposal, unless members wanted to make a proposal, actually it comes beyond New Southgate.
Well, effectively,
it goes into North London Business Park.
effectively it is.
That's what's being offered at the moment. Martin.
Sorry, thanks for your chair. Yes, it's sorry, thanks. Okay, yes, members and chairman. The proposal at this stage is a strategic sort of consultation looking at the station at the existing New Southgate station. Okay, you can appreciate that sort of clearly providing the station impacts the location is somewhat easier and sort of cost effective, creating some potentially a new station elsewhere. And of course, this proposal may have significant implications locally for sites like London Business Park and others. that are identified sort of within sort of your local plan, but also neighbouring boroughs' local plans, including the North Circular Road Area Action Plan.
My point was that if you make allowances for it when you're doing work, because I said the stapling plants are going to go up there, if the enabling works are done, it can be done very cheap, maybe it'll be good, but it's there, rather than wait till later when it's necessary.
So, Chairman, I can add something on this. The first thing is obviously the actual time frame for this being put into place is around 2030, so there's an awful lot of work to do, and none of the details available now. The one point I would say, though, is the sidings in which trains will end and come out needs to be north of the station.
Yeah.
So at the moment, inherently, that is going to be potentially in that area north and north-south street, probably south of North London Business Park. If you put station in North London Business Park, there isn't anywhere north of it to have the sidings.
We don't need to have the north.
Sorry?
You wouldn't need to have the stapling north, you know, south. Just stand up.
Inherently, the problem that you've got at the end of the line there is you'd be shuttling trains in and out of the sidings.
Like that happens everywhere else.
Sorry?
That happens everywhere else.
I think that's a key issue for the further detailed consultation that will occur.
I appreciate that. But as I said, that's saying the stapling has to be north. It's not. Normally you would have it on the exit side, what was called the upside of the station.
Yeah, we're just supporting what Councillor Williams is saying. I mean, we know this is a high-level strategic consultation, but can we just flag an interest and, if this, stabling is being built in this area, that the feasibility of putting a station alongside that could be looked into, considering that stabling is being put in that location, that may be a lot lower cost than it would normally be to put an extra station in that location.
I understand there's a role having extension of the Northern Line into the Middle East from Finchley Central. You could have a branch line that went up through the sidings, which I understand again.
Which the part of a different proposal that has been considered some of the
So it's a vote that could be made at this stage. Yeah.
Can I just, Councillor Old touched on this, but in our consultation response, can we just include, a couple of sentences to say that, we recognise, the significant construction and traffic issues, and we want that to be managed in a way that protects the interests of local residents, and that residents were fully consulted over those proposals, detailed proposals once they're known.
I would go without the need to say it, but we'll say it anyhow. And there are residents in Cotswold on the other side of the railway line that clearly would be affected indirectly. Equally, there will be concerns that the area that's being earmarked for the sidings are currently occupied by a number of long-standing businesses, and clearly those will either go or have to be relocated, and there will be significant loss of local employment from those sites as well. Equally, I suppose there'll be more employment coming from the Crossrail terminal there as well. So,
what would be more significant as far as I'm concerned?
Yeah, some residents will mind seeing it.
Some residents will be delighted to see the back of the
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what I put in my response to you as well.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Can I just ask, as Mr. Cowy's here, is there any further information on car parking? I understand there's some sort of plans for car park around Regal Drive. Is there any more, do you have any more information on that?
Microphone.
Sorry, no, Councillor, no, very little detail. Again, as I said, this is just a high level sort of proposal, and clearly mention has to be sort of made of various facilities and sort of maybe provided.
what, I mean, we don't have any information on that at all, or is there is some information?
Not specific, no, no.
Thank you.
People who park on the retail park. Yeah. It'll turn out from the retail park if you're not careful. Okay, can we agree the recommendation subject to adding another couple of sentences, putting down a marker about a possible extension into North London Business Park, or what is now known as North London Business Park, what it will be known in 2030, I've no idea. All right.
Looks, yeah, it's flagging up our concerns around the. Although, you know, it should be taken for granted, but I think it's worth putting a marker down.
All right. So agree. Thank you.
Now we move on to members' items.
So, Chairman, we'll go item 4.
Sorry, as I said, we're going to move that to before parking policies, so there are some questions related to that. Members' items, item 5.5a, Borough Safety Strategy. Councillor Barrier.
This issue, the issue of road safety in the borough, was brought to the floor by new councillors and following a serious accident in Bugle, Underhill. Amy had put a motion in her name for the last full council meeting, but she then withdrew it, as she considered that the Environment Committee would be the most appropriate forum to discuss and make decisions on this matter. Unfortunately, Amy is not able to present this herself, as she's not a member of this committee. So I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to present my members' item on Amy's behalf. Amy's original motion has been switched to, and Laurie will be presenting their half of it on a particular issue following this accident. I'm interested in borough-wide concerned about road safety. Barnet has had the second highest number of casualties from road traffic accidents in London for the last 2 years, with figures as stated in the notes for this item. In addition to the Chesterfield Road incident, my colleagues from across Barnet have told me of concerns that residents in their wards have about road safety, and I would think that probably every member of this committee has similar hotspots and concerns about roads in their wards. The ones I've heard about include Victoria Road in East Barnet, Clovelly Avenue in Colindale, Church Lane in East Finchley, the Grove, Courthouse Road and Squires Lane in West Finchley. There have been some individual measures put in place to address concerns, such as the 20-mile-per-hour zone in Church Lane and the crossing in Courthouse Road. But I would suggest that just dealing with individual concerns is not the best way to apply a borough-wide road safety strategy. Fatal accidents that have taken place include a death following a road traffic accident in Squires Lane, and a death, I can't remember the exact date, about 5 years ago, there was a death of a young woman in a road traffic accident in Holly Avenue in Burnsville. These are but two. But in 2012 alone, we know that there were 7 fatalities and 105 serious injuries. We were given an officer briefing on this with some of their ideas about this before this meeting. As your list of briefing notes point out, this data relates to injury accidents only, and not near misses or damage-only incidents. And although these may be of concern, injury accidents are more consistently reported. Residents' requests often highlight road safety concerns, and these are generally cross-checked. But sometimes locations exceed as unsafe when in fact the accident risk is low compared to similar locations. However, I would say that it does not take a death or a serious injury, or even necessarily an accident report to police, for it to be a road safety concern. And yes, residents' concerns may be subjective, and can be, of course, parochial if they're concerned about a particular road in a particular neighbourhood. It doesn't mean to say that there is not a safety issue there. It doesn't mean to say that there are not risks there. In Barnet, in my report, a child was recently knocked down, unfortunately not seriously injured, in the junction by Woodcroft School, where I'm governor. And I'm also aware of similar accidents and near misses outside Goldbeater School. And I can tell you personally of incidents that happened outside my house and to my car over the last few years. I had a car written off, but it was parked in the road outside my house by a vehicle, I don't know what, speeding down the road and crashing into it. Another incident, which is on a long list of 9 months and crashes in the junction by my house, the police were chasing a car. It came on the corner of Montrose Road very fast, took off, flew over the hedge of my front garden, crashed through the fence and crashed into my neighbour's car. Fortunately, it was in the middle of the night, and fortunately nobody was hurt from that one, but it was a shock to everybody. And there's a bus stop right outside my house. If that had been 8 o'clock in the morning, with up to 20 children queuing at that bus stop, God knows what may have happened. Nobody was injured in that accident, but I would say that there is still a risk from it. Just get that going. Yeah. Yes, I remember that. Even one fatality or injury is one too many. We can continue to deal with these incidents and petitions and campaigns with local residents on a piecemeal basis as they occur, or we can say enough is enough and start to tackle road safety and Barnet proactively, and by actively engaging with local residents and the emergency services to try and stop the unnecessary carnage from road accidents, from road traffic accidents on our streets. Acceptance of what was a promotion on what was now my item would be a clear statement of intent from us as elected members to address road safety concerns and to proactively start to reduce the number of casualties on our road. There is no recommendation to this item, but I would suggest a recommendation, and I'm happy for people who are better than I that maybe will work, which is along the lines of recommend a borough-wide road safety forum is put in place with the remit of ensuring that the borough road safety strategy addresses borough-wide concerns for road safety. Really well better, that's my suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Sandra.
John, if Councillor Farrier's prime objective is what she actually said, which was that one fatality is too many, then the only solution and the only way of reaching that objective is to ban cars from our roads. The accidents that she outlined... The fact of the matter is that the sort of accidents that Councillor Farrier outlined would not have been stopped by any borough-wide strategy. If there are idiot drivers, no strategy will stop. And let me say that I say this as someone who lost my own father, killed on a zebra crossing in this borough by a car driven by an 83-year-old who probably should not have been driving that night. No road safety strategy that this council would ever have put forward would have stopped that accident. Not at all. And you cannot introduce borough-wide policies for idiots and people who are totally irresponsible. And that is the fact. We can look, as we do, at every serious accident, and we can look at the factors around them. And there was one in my ward which involved a jogger who was killed by a car. She was jogging and she had her earphones in, and clearly if you're out jogging and you can't hear what's going on around you, you are far more likely to step off the pavement into the path of a car than if you don't have earphones in. And these are factors, you can't prejudge them. It wasn't the road layout that caused the problem in that case. There wasn't any changes that needed to be made as a result of it. It was just a rather tragic, as was my father's, a tragic accident that happened. You cannot eliminate those sort of things. We've looked, we had a task and finish group that reported back in April, which recommended 20 mile an hour zones, not right. It didn't go as far as saying right the way across the borough, very specific, because it's impracticable and the police won't enforce it anyhow. But we will consider 20 mile an hour zones around schools. Church Lane in East Finchley, where local residents want it, they got it. The same thing will happen over the next year or 2 years or 3 years as they roll out around schools in particular and in other places where they're thought appropriate. Will they cut accidents down? Possibly. They might cut down the severity of accidents if drivers take a blind bit of notice of it. But given that the police are saying quite clearly to us that they don't have the manpower or the resources to enforce 20 mile an hour zones or 20 mile an hour speed limits anywhere, their usefulness will be in the minds of drivers, and that's where it will end. Other changes that have been come forward that are effective have generally come through school travel plans, and we take those very seriously, and a lot of the comments and thoughts that have come through schools and through their travel plans have been implemented. And that is the right way to do it. You have to look at each one, each area, each location on its merits. In a borough of this size, and this argument here that we have more accidents than other boroughs. We are the largest borough in London in terms of population. We're the second largest in terms of square miles. I suspect we're probably the largest in terms of miles of roads and pavements. So it's hardly surprising that there should be more accidents in Barnet than there are in other boroughs. If you compare us to Tower Hamlets or Haringey, which are half or two-thirds the size of this borough, of course you're going to get different results. But I say it again, no, in my view, and my experience, you cannot eliminate idiot drivers and irresponsible drivers, and they are the people who are responsible for the accidents.
Councillor Williams.
I think the whole idea is to try and get a system whereby all the information is gathered together here. So, so when residents have an interest in having a 20 mile an hour zone or whatever, there's a standard procedure which can take place.
My understanding that's already happening. Yes, so we do collect a lot of information.
So that was the whole idea, that when residents would come.
Sorry, so when the task and so the purpose, the intention is to over the next year look again at road safety, and then by looking at all the data that we get, and then we could take that through the area committee, the 3 area committees that we have, so that they can review safety, which is something they've always done anyway. So it seems like a good process if we want to pick up concerns. And then obviously those area committees can look at whether they want to have 20 mile an hour zones around schools, as was suggested in the task and finish report and was accepted by could be aware of that.
I mean, it says it quite clearly in the briefing on the council meeting's got it. We haven't agreed in March this year. The recommendation of the right 20 mile an hour So last definition included updating the council's road safety plan to include a clear policy position on 20-mile-an-hour zones and limits, and for this to be delivered within 12 months from the date of reporting to Cabinet, i.e. March 2015. So it's already in process.
I do take your point. Wasn't quite what was intended.
I think Councillor Ferrier was first.
But you haven't spoken yet, so
yeah, well, that maybe you're quoting from also just goes on to say a wider reaching rewrite of the Borough Road Safety Plan is probably appropriate in order to meaningfully address the inclusion of the 20-mile-an-hour zone policy and will be warranted. So I think one of the recommendations is that we want to see that happen. We want to rewrite of the road safety plan and we want to outline that 20-mile-an-hour zone which should be included in it. But I also wanted to support the idea of a forum, so that dedicated forum so that residents can directly input. The problem, I appreciate there are resource constraints, but the problem of tackling this into other committees is it doesn't get the dedicated time that it needs. In response to Councillor Salinger's point, I mean, obviously it is the case that you can never eliminate idiots, idiot drivers, but a proper road safety plan can eliminate it as far as possible. Just because you can't eliminate any stupid driver doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do more than we are doing at the moment.
So, I mean, the fact is the plan is coming, the rewrite's happening, it's including the 20-mile-an-hour, that's coming to March. The question you're asking is, how can we get the individual cases and how the reporting of those individual issues in various areas included within that, so that is considered. And I think the idea of that is potentially in each area committee, they produce a report of those particular areas that are not on the radar, for argument's sake, and that can be agreed at those area committees.
That's what area committees are for.
Because they know the areas, and therefore they're a representative from each ward, I think, on each committee, and therefore they should be putting forward where there is the need to be included within that. Because I think that would actually save time to ensure that we have it ready for the March 2015 and it's all included within that. Councillor Cttee.
Some accidents are unavoidable because of changing drivers or whatever, but others follow a pattern. And I think that there are certain circumstances, and accidents happen due to those circumstances, and that's everywhere. So even though there are local issues and local areas, it would be good, I think, to have a policy that if you have a dangerous bend, if you have a very fast road that needs crossing and things, that it can be a borough-wide policy that will be applied to those situations in local areas.
Point out that if we set up a forum, we wouldn't have any constitutional position. We take this through the area committees and they can make recommendations. So that seems like it's a forum, it's forums we've already got set up. We will then bring any safety policy back here to this committee. So rather than set up a forum which would have no status, because it's the same as the issue we've had previously about working groups, it wouldn't have any status in the constitution, whereas the area committees already do have that.
No, I understand that, but it's just that it seems that an umbrella policy would actually sort of link everything up.
Sorry, I think the umbrella policy should come here, because that's the role of
That is going to come here, that's going to plan for the March. But what I'm saying is that actually the information, the detailed information from each area should be fed into that report via the area committees.
Thank you, Chairman. I sort of understand very strongly, of course, I think we all do, the sentiment behind Councillor Farrier's request. But as Councillor Salinger said, you can't avoid idiots. However, I wonder, I don't know, is there any mechanism in place whereby if there is either a fatal accident or a serious injury or something which you say, thank God it wasn't wasn't serious, but it could have been, a really nasty accident, whether that is in itself reported to the area committees so that they can look at whether there is actually a problem in that area which created that, or whether it was just one of those things that could happen and would happen anyway. Because if the actual accidents, of which members may not be personally aware, did come to those committees, then we could look at them and say, yes, it's a terrible bender, or it's bad lights, or whatever it might be. Do you think that's a possibility?
I think any serious accidents will be made aware to the local
Well, I
members.
was thinking also the intermediate ones.
So, Chairman, I sat on the Area Environment Subcommittee for the last 4 years, and it did receive just such reports.
Good.
And acted on them.
That's all you need then.
Councillor Hart.
Very tiny point, Chairman. I've seen no allusion at all in all this to the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents. I thought quite a lot of what we're talking about has been covered already by a body like that.
Okay. Councillor Ferry, do you want to sum up and I want to close this item?
Back to respond to some of that. First of all, Councillor Sanager, you said that you disagree with my view that one fatality is too many.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't say that at all. I didn't say that at all. What I said was...
Did you let me finish? I listened to you.
What I said...
Let him correct what he said. You made a statement which
Can I
was...
make clear what I said? I said that if your prime objective is to have a situation where there are no fatalities on the road, the only way to achieve it is to ban cars.
That may be one of the things. But I say, yes,
It's what you want to say.
practically, we are not going to ban fatalities altogether. I think we're all aware of that. But we must have an ambition to bring them down as much as possible. And as I said, not only fatalities, but incidents where there were not deaths or serious injuries, but where there was a huge risk. Yes, there are stupid people driving. Of course there are. And the accidents are caused by people not paying attention, not doing other things. But if you just say, well, okay, so be it, then do you disagree that we should have had rules on safety belts, on child seats, on talking and texting on mobile phones, for example, on drink driving, because some people are too stupid to do that, to act sensibly? These laws were put in place because people were doing silly things, and it just helped to bring down road traffic accidents generally, all these measures. Yes, the TFG on 20 mile per hour zones came up with some good recommendations, some of which I think our group amended and changed some of those as well. 20 mile per hour zones are not the whole answer to everything. This is why we need a borough-wide forum to look at what may be all the alternatives, ways that we can improve road safety on our roads. And for the same reason, I don't think that the neighbourhood forums, the residents forums are the places to address this.
I didn't say residents forums, I said area environment subcommittees.
Area environment subcommittees, which were one of the residents forums. The concerns, as in the officer's report, the concerns brought by local residents, individual things in their own streets and so on, are necessarily parochial and subjective. And the borough-wide forum is to address that, to look at all these concerns, but in a borough-wide way, so we can come up with a proper policy on how we, as a borough, will address all these concerns, not any particular one. I mean, we have one that Laura's going to talk about later, which has particular concerns. Yeah, that is a big concern. But that needs to be part as well of the borough-wide ones, for all the other ones that I mentioned that we know from our areas. And this is why I'm proposing a forum. A forum is not, Pam said there's no constitutional basis for it. I'm sure that can be got around. And it may be true that we need to put some officer time. We know how tight officer time is and how many officers we have at the moment to do this kind of thing. But the forum does not have to meet every week or every month. It can have very tight remit for looking at it, for getting evidence and coming back. in 1 year it takes the report to come back, it may meet only 2 or 3 times. It doesn't need to be a tremendous thing, but it does need to involve the statutory services, possibly people from hospital, central police, health services, admin services, and so on, other services who are concerned about representing our borough residents associations, everybody wants to give evidence to it. So that's what we are looking at, so that's what I want to have, and that's what I'm proposing on every 2 levels behalf.
Just to add in a close here, after we've made recommendations, but obviously you're saying it is a year forum, that would obviously delay the March 2015 implementation and adoption of agreement subject to if this committee agrees to it, or the actual plan that will be coming to us in March 2015. Would you realise that?
But we need to have that consultation with you all these things before that plan comes to us. It's like for a forum.
I think, you know, the forum...
It's a year.
Well, the forum, the time for the forum can be adjusted to... We don't want to delay a road safety strategy coming back, so it seems to be reasonable to adjust the timings for the forum in order to enable the strategies to be delivered by March. I don't think that would be a problem.
From what I've heard, the members of this committee don't agree with having a borough-wide strategy anyway, so we don't say that.
Because it's been put across in different ways, Chair. It's been suggested that this group is going to look at bends in roads and things like that. That's the role of the Area Environment Subcommittee.
Not necessarily specific.
Yes, it is. That is the role of the Area Environment Subcommittee, to look at individual roads, individual places where there have been serious accidents, and look and see if there are anything that can be changed that will make any difference. But I don't know what's in the
not look at individual concerns like that. We would look at borough-wide.
We're having a long agenda. Can you put your recommendation forward, your wording of your recommendation, and then if there's an amendment, then we'll discuss that.
As I said, I'd be pleased to have the wording by recommendation timed up, not particularly voted. The recommendation is...
The council trying to address
the borough-wide safety, the borough-wide road safety forum is set in place with the remit of ensuring that the borough road safety strategy addresses the borough-wide concerns for road safety.
Yeah, I think for the forum to feed into the road, the forum to feed into the rewrite of the borough's road safety strategy.
I would like to make an amendment to that and say that the area environment subcommittees feed into that as opposed to setting up another forum. That is the correct forum. Those area environments produce a report which will then feed into that plan which is due to come to this committee in March.
So, Chairman, can I just clarify? What you're saying is that the Area Environment Subcommittees will look at a draft of the plan before it comes back here, so that each of them will have a chance to comment on it.
Yeah, but I think even before that, because obviously the plan's going to be probably close to March. I mean, we need them to feed in information into that before March. So obviously, I think they would be given a brief as to what those area environment subcommittees can add and inform the plan locally within their constituencies. Is that correct?
Through you, Chair. From an officer perspective, it would be sensible for us to take all the evidence base that we're amassing to probably an autumn round of committees, and then for them to have a look at a draft document in the spring before it comes back here.
Maybe we should go to the Area Forum consultation.
And I think one of the things we want is people to have the chance to feed into the borough-wide strategy, not just to feed in, there's an issue here, there's an issue there, which is important and people will do, but to have an input into the general principles.
That's why Councillor Sanders is suggesting the Residents' Forum as well, so that's where else they can feed in. So, okay, so do we have some wording that we can...
Well, we've got
Councillor Farrier's recommendation, which is to have a borough-wide road safety put in place with a remit to, so a borough-wide forum on road safety put in place with a remit to address the borough-wide road safety issues, and Councillor Shannon has added again about the forum speeding.
Oh, no, I think it was just an amendment to Councillor Farrier to say that to set up a forum in order to take evidence to feed in to the borough-wide road safety strategy.
Councillor, I'm suggesting an alternative, which is that opportunity should be through the area forums.
I think Councillor's already suggested that.
No, you're saying another forum. Councillor Simon was saying a residence forum. Existing residence forum, not a new forum to be set up. That's what Councillor Simon suggested.
Yes.
Okay. So, no, it's only two. So we've got Councillor Farrier's proposal with Councillor Shrining's slight amendment, so if we can vote on that first, so all those in agreement with Councillor Farrier's recommendation with Councillor Shrining's slight amendment, all those in favour? Okay, it's fine. All those in favour of Councillor Salinger's?
Those against that?
Oh, okay, so all those against? It's not against. Okay, so all those in favour of...
What happened?
He's not voting.
All those against? I'll use my casting vote. Okay, all those in favour of Councillor Salinger's recommendation? That's carried.
Those against?
Those against? Okay. Aye. That's carried. Sorry?
You've got no report showing that through the area.
No, but it was going through the area forums fight and then onto the area committee. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Okay. I'll now move on to the next item. 5B, rotating measures for Chesterfield Road. Councillor Williams.
Yes, there's recently a traffic accident, Chesterfield Road. Sorry. Caused by a bus hitting a child with a bicycle. This is a relatively narrow road which has bus routes running down it and lots of parking. We would like to have a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit on there, and also a zebra crossing, because it's hardly a safe road to cross. There's also a problem with local youth facilities. There's not much for them to do there, apart from a large...
That has to do with this subject,
Well, this is part and parcel of it, because the only thing they've got to is to get to a piece of grass, they have to cross the road. So you need traffic. I appreciate there's caused a problem with the bus routes because of the turning, but I think we have to look at this.
Is it, thank you, Councillor. Is it my understanding that yourself and I think all members have already met officers down on site?
I haven't myself met the officer, but I have seen, I do know the site.
But there has been a meeting down there with officers and
Yes.
members?
Yes.
Okay. And a way forward has been agreed?
Yes, they are going forward with this.
Fine. So what I suggest is that I feel uncomfortable agreeing specific proposals here until the outcome of the feasibility. It's already been agreed something needs to be done. What is done and how it's done is a different matter. And therefore, I think I would recommend that they carry out that feasibility study, and then it goes to agreed by Mr.
The sorts of works we're talking about here would need to be included in the local implementation plan programme. So it would come back here as part of that programme, either for a modification for this year or for inclusion in next year's programmes. But this committee makes those decisions.
Councillor Shine.
I think, I think we do need some specific proposals tonight. That we want to ask officers to look at introducing the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit and looking at improved crossing points in the area, including looking at zebra crossings. That will then be considered by officers in the report that will then come back to the committee next time. I think we should be making a recommendation that we are agreeing that we want officers to look at this and to look at those specific items. Councillor Sargent.
Chairman, if my memory is right, Chesterfield Road is very heavily parked, and we should not be taking any decisions here to put in a zebra crossing, because that would need to be consulted with the people who live in the road. Apart from anything else, it would lose how many parking spaces for a zebra crossing? 10, 12, something like that. And people might, on balance, prefer to keep their parking spaces. That's up to the people who live in the road, not for us. In my view, this ought to be at the area subcommittee. It's only here because it's got, there were 1,000 signatures which I suspect triggered it coming to, it would previously have gone to business management. I don't know what the Constitution says about petitions these days, but that's probably why it wouldn't be on the agenda here. But we should refer it to the area subcommittee. They are the people, that committee are the people who should be instructing the officers to go and do the preparatory work. And I'm surprised that officers have been working out. There's a long queue of very similar requests from other parts of the Chipping Barnet area, and they should be prioritised by the committee. And I'm surprised that, to be honest, that officers have prioritised this, despite the accident, without member involvement.
Members are involved.
Members have made decisions.
No, Councillor Slanger is absolutely right, that is the normal process. But in any accident where the potential was for a fatality, as in this case, we would undertake an investigation and look at what's required to prevent it.
And prioritise it.
Okay.
And prioritise it.
That's for the committee.
That would depend on the outcome
of the investigation. If it's found that those work has to be done.
Yes, I know, but you've got to have the investigation.
Yeah. So that's already been instructed. The investigation is in hand, that has been done. So I think the decision of what is done, right, should be aligned with the area. Are you a ward member? Are you a ward member, Councillor?
Not London, I mean Barnet.
Right, so there's no ward members here. Right, so the ward members that sit on, there will be a ward member that sits on the area environment subcommittee, and it's for them to take the lead within that, on that committee, to present it and to decide to represent their wards. I don't think it's appropriate for us to make that decision.
Well, I mean, it's perfectly appropriate. The local the members for that ward, as you say, have met officers. They are fully, in similar way as Councillor Farris said earlier, they're fully supportive of these members' items. And I think, a serious accident has happened here. We know that there could be a significant amount of work that needs to be done, which may affect the way in which it is funded. So all we're saying is that this committee is asking officers to undertake a feasibility study of what's required, including looking at 20-mile-an-hour speed limits and improving crossings. Now, detailed decisions will be taken down the line, and any work will of course be subject to consultation, as Councillor Salinger says. But I think this committee, it wants to make I would propose, makes a recommendation on that basis.
What I would propose is that the feasibility study is completed and those options are presented to the... so if you want a recommendation, I think that this committee can say that to instruct officers to continue and complete that feasibility study, right? And for then options to be drawn up and then presented to the committee. So we can instruct them to consider the options that are feasible and are required in that location. It's not hard for us to preempt what measures come out of that feasibility study.
No, but it has been suggested by residents and local members that two of the issues are speed and crossing. So I think without prejudging what comes out of the feasibility study, I think it's wise to just put down low markers because they are the two concerns. What we want to be included in the study. Can I just ask a separate question? If it goes to the Area Environment Committee, does that mean they're empowered to agree any spending that's needed? See, Mr. Hall said no.
I think we've been in a situation where, obviously, in the officer's report, we've said that we're looking into the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, reviewing the bus routes, looking at potential improved crossing points, and some issues about land around the school to help achieve that, and also working with the school around their travel plan. So that's already agreed as the initial feasibility study. I think if there are a huge, there could be some very major works that come out of that, and that might have to actually be a separate bid to Transport for London as part of the local implementation plan to actually carry out those works. So at the moment we don't know the scale and the cost. What I suggest is it can go back to the area committee to agree what the scope of the, when the study is finished, it should go back to the area committee. They agree whether talk about it and discuss it. But if it needs to substitute for something else that's already in the programme, it needs to come back here, or it will also need to come back here with naturally if it's a scheme that we're backing to go into next year's plan.
Right.
So if it needs to be some,
I think all the recommendation is that for officers to continue with the feasibility study and to consider the options and initiatives that they're currently looking at, including, and you can put the 5 options that you've got in your briefing down. That's not a problem.
Okay, fine. Can I just also, we seem to just forgotten what Councillor Williams said about the youth facilities as well. Can we ask other committees to look into the youth facilities in that area?
Not through this committee.
No, we're just asking, can we ask as well? This committee request that other committees look at those issues.
You're rated as a member right of those committees.
You could raise it. I'm just asking to simplify the bureaucracy. If we just say on that part of Councillor Williams' item, we just ask her to refer to the relevant committees.
Yeah. So you want to refer that item to the Children's Committee?
Yeah, to the Children's Committee.
Yeah, I checked the item with Mary before the committee, we can refer it to Chair.
Alright, so all those in favour of for instructing officers to continue and complete the feasibility study to include the 5 items highlighted in their briefing report, which all members have in front of them. I'm not going to go through it all, but all those 5 items. Then that the actual scope of what is done is decided and discussed at Area Environment Subcommittee. And then obviously there's a funding issue that now obviously come back to this committee. Is that agreed?
Yes.
Okay. And then Councillor Schreiber wants to refer the issue of provisions of youth facilities within that location to an education committee. So is everyone happy with that?
Yes.
Agreed? Councillor Schneiderman's item, I think, is it, I think we can be put by officers because this is a report, not the members like.
When you get to the questions, item 6.
Yeah. Or the Greg come in for this one. First, I think we'll look at the 30-minute free parking item. There's three sections to this. So first, the 30-minute free parking section.
Through you, Chair. First item is actually a proposal to introduce at least 30 minutes free parking in all town centres. The first thing I'd raise is that all of our parking controls in town centres and elsewhere are put in place for traffic management purposes on the Road Traffic Regulation of 1984. Now that is not, road traffic purposes are not purposes that are driven by income or by making parking free. They are put in place in order to provide the best parking for that location whilst also controlling congestion and ensuring the proper flow of traffic. So what this report reflects in terms of the response to the item is actually an explanation of what the traffic management purposes are in that regard, and recommends therefore that each town centre has peculiarities that warrant tailored schemes for each, and that we ask the committee to agree that a standard 30-minute free parking scheme is not appropriate for all town centres. What I'd also point out to the committee there is also a similar proposal for centre proportion on the agenda where we apply the same proposal, and also there is a parking policy on the agenda where we describe the proposal for not having a one-size-fits-all parking policy, but one that is based entirely upon the needs of a particular town centre in terms of the ability of residents and businesses to park, to allow proper loading and unloading for servicing of those shops that are there, and also ensures that there is a proper turnover there which increases and maximises the footfall in town centres.
Thank you. I think it's also maybe this point. Apologies, I maybe should have asked Mr. actually to help with things, ask some questions on this item as well. So maybe he comes forward now with his 36 questions. 7 questions. Sure. Okay, thank you.
Apologise for the shirt.
Okay, question 1. You know what their usage is from various pay by phone records, so why is there need for this technology unless it's for enabling a zero tolerance regime?
It's correct that we do have certain amounts of information from pay by phone, but all that will tell us is how many vehicles are parked for a particular session, so someone could park and pay for it throughout a period, but we wouldn't know whether or not they've actually stayed for 15 minutes or for 2 hours. Pay management equipment will give us much more accurate data, in that it will tell us exactly when the vehicle has arrived and it will tell us exactly when the vehicle has left. So we're going to use that more accurate data to understand exactly how often those days are actually available for a car park.
Question 2. You haven't actually answered the question, which was how much manager is paid in total to Paris. I wasn't after the 10p fees.
That, I think we have answered the question in that saying that that information isn't available to the council, because any payments that are made by motorists aren't paid directly to pay by phone, and that would be via the options
that are available for that service. So that's a transaction that takes place between the motorist and pay by phone, and isn't something that the council receives data on. And in fact, probably wouldn't be able to get the data on it because of the data protection.
Sorry, I know I'm not allowed to follow it, but all I was looking at is somebody pays £2 to park and then 10p a fee. That's 2.10. You must get the £2. You should know how much you've been paid. And your colleagues nodding at you.
If you're just talking about the fact that we have a £2 payment and we therefore, for every payment there's a 10p, then yes, we can provide that data. What we can't...
I'm just looking for a total figure.
That's, yeah, no, it is paid to them. We can't tell you what the other element is.
No, I don't care. I just wanted the total.
Okay. Question 4.
3.
Sorry, 3.
Yeah, I have. Sorry, you're right. So the coin mechanism is still inside the meter, is it?
There is a facility for the coin mechanism to be slotted into the existing units. It may supply cost, but it would require the coin facility to be slotted in.
Right. If it's 440,000 cash collection costs for 450 machines, how can it possibly be the £199,420 shown on page 15 of the report for 59 machines?
I think the point we're trying to make in this particular answer is that the collection costs that we incurred previously for the point in time when we had a lot more machines worldwide was a completely different service at that point. It was provided in-house by a team that not only did this function, but they operated other functions as well. So the true cost that was charged to the parking account may not be the full cost of running the service, and that service doesn't exist any longer. So it's not something that we could use now. What we've done is gone to the market in terms of companies who provide that service and asked them to give us a price for what it would cost to collect based on the number of machines we currently have in the road. And that's where the current figure was calculated from. Now, obviously, if we get to the point where we go out to tender, then there is a chance that we could get a more competitive price. But at this stage, we're not at that competitive tender stage, and it's based on the figures that have been quoted to us based on the inquiry we make, if we were to potentially go down the route.
6.
No follow-up on 6. Sorry, no follow-up on 6 or 7. We'll go to number 8. Oh, sorry. No, skip 8 as well. Skip 9.
Okay, so on this item, I only want to focus on...
oh, right, sorry. I follow you.
We'll invite you back for the...
Okay, fine. What do you want next?
Okay, I think...
Is it just to run through all the questions? So it's a separate item on the agenda as questions.
Yes, they're related to a separate item.
Maybe
Just run through all.
I think it should be brought back. I think we'll stick to item 9. So,
Okay.
Fine.
So, is that all of them?
That's it for the moment.
Okay, that's fine. But no idea.
Okay. Councillor Shine then.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, you know, most people here are probably very familiar with these arguments, but I do think it is an important point to make. And, you know, I do still believe that such a policy would be the right thing to do. Indeed, I mean, part of the report itself actually sums it up quite well and says a reduction in the 30-minute stay tariff to enable free parking would undoubtedly increase patronage, which is exactly what we want to do. to the initial benefit of local businesses, which again is exactly what we want to do. So that is the reason, why I put this item down again. It's overwhelmingly supported by residents and by traders. I know that parking policy and this report constantly goes on about one size fits all, not allowing a one size fits all approach. Now, there are always individual circumstances that we should look at, but I don't know of any town centre that would not benefit from a 30-minute free parking period in order to increase patronage and help to sustain a vital, strong town centre. In terms of, I do have some questions. Maybe to start with, over the costs. Paragraph 521 says that if we were to introduce 30-minute free parking, it would cost £3.2 million, which just seems absolutely incredible, and I would appreciate a breakdown of that, why it would cost £3.2 million.
Has anyone got any other comments for?
Yeah, I ask another.
Anyone else got to speak on this item?
My view would be that if there were free, if there was half an hour free parking, people would drive in to park there. Oh, sorry, would drive in to park there and drop the place up. In other words, the point made by Mr. Declan in the Declan Hall is that the turnover, the movement, the flow of traffic, call it what you wish, which was the initial idea of any charges at all when they were brought in long ago, was to make vehicles move. People simply park themselves in front of a shop, quite happy, it costs nothing. And I would think they would rather block up a lot of the spaces. Whether we would lose money or not, I don't know. It says here we would. But it would certainly not add to the general viability of the shopping centres and the people who buy them.
Okay. I'm just going to add a point. You would have seen that later on in the current policy, the proposal was for 85% occupancy. Actually, I'll ask Councillor Flanagan a question. And do you think, if it's already achieving 85 in locations, do you think that the 30 minutes would help? And what is it looking to achieve if it's already achieving the desired occupancy rate?
I mean, I don't have the percentages, but it'd be interesting to see if there's we can have the percentages for what the occupancy rates are in every town centre. But, my observation from the town centres that I've been in is that providing some free parking would boost the number of visitors. And I think we're not talking about half an hour, we're not talking about indefinite free parking, we're talking about 30 minutes, and the point about the 30 minutes is it enables people to stop for those short stays, but also encourages turnover because it's 30 minutes. So if you want to park for longer than that, you would have to pay for park for longer there. So 30 minutes supports turnover.
Actually, you didn't answer my question. I said, if they were achieving 85%, do you think that is, what would the half an hour achieve if it's got the desired effect from the existing charge?
You still
having the turnover.
No, it could be people could be parked there for 2 hours. That's the whole point. It's to make people only stop for half an hour.
No, that's for free. The lot doesn't mean they're not going to stay for 2 hours.
That's it. You have half hour free. You can't stay on after.
Oh, you can't stay on after 2 hours? After half an hour?
No.
So what if you want to shop? What if you want to shop for longer?
Then you go to one of the parking spaces which is further away.
So if you're a lady who wants to go into the hairdressers and it's going to take longer than half an hour, you can't park there.
Well, you'll get a ticket afterwards.
Fine, so that's...
Council Williams is suggesting that there should be half an hour free, and then you have to move your car afterwards to a place somewhere further away from the shops that you're wanting to go to. Is that what you're suggesting?
So the reason being that if you want to do a long-term shop, then you should park further away. Say the half-hour shops.
So where are you going to park? Where are you going to park, Father Louise? In outside of the town centre?
No, it already says that there's space further on, which is
Can I
up
ask a
to
question, please?
Yes.
Thank you. If we park for half an hour, after the half, nothing happens in half an hour, no matter what it is, unless you just run and snatch up shopping already down the road. Are we going to charge after the 30 minutes? Is this what we're saying?
Yeah.
Well, I want to hear what the chairman says.
Councillor Williams has suggested that you park for half an hour free and then you have to move your car.
Well, no, I wouldn't agree to that. I'm asking you all, if after the half an hour free, are you going to pay them?
Well, this proposal is from Councillor Schneider and it's not from myself. If that's Councillor Schneider.
Is that what you have in mind, Alan?
It seems the Labour Party are in total disarray.
Have an adjournment. Have an adjournment so you can have a group meeting.
Get the point, because...
Yeah, no, the point about my asking on 30 minutes.
The policy, Graham.
The point about my asking on 30 minutes parking is that you would be able to park for 30 minutes free of charge anywhere. If you wanted, it would be possible to park for longer, but you would have to pay if you wished to park for longer.
Councillor Schneider, let me just ask a question. So you've got you parked in the place for half an hour and you want to park for longer. So you come out to your meter that you want cash in the middle of the hairdresser, and you want to pay the meter to top it out because you're having to stay another half an hour. Is that what you're trying to say?
Well, if you only take advantage of the 30 minutes and then you decided you wanted to stay for longer than 30 minutes, then yes.
So, okay.
But if you were having your haircut, you might assume it would take longer than half an hour.
So you pay for all
You pay from the start.
Pay for all of them.
How can you pay from the start? How can you pay from the beginning if you're paying by cash?
Look, this is not a complicated. I don't understand why you don't understand the principle. The short stay is you can park for 30 minutes free of charge. If you want to park for longer, you pay to park for longer.
Councillor Schneider, Councillor Sanders.
Can I suggest Councillor Schneider takes his group outside and try and work out one policy between them, because they're at complete odds with each other in what they're arguing. But the fact of the matter is that you put your finger on, if we are achieving the 85% that we aim to do now, with the system we've got now, why change it? And if as I suspect, one of the shopping centres, and I'll give him credit, Councillor Schneider might have visited one as well, but the one that he's closest to is North Finchley. And my experience of North Finchley is I have trouble finding a parking place, and from time to time have to go into Lodge Lane rather than being able to park on the highway.
Nothing wrong with parking in Lodge Lane, that's what it's there for, it's a car park.
I know, and sometimes you can't park in there either. The occupancy levels are good. I can't remember the last time that one of my residents came to me and said, why can't we park free in the high street anymore, or have it back again? They don't. In fact, I can't remember the last time anyone complained about paying by phone either.
Okay. Councillor Ferrier and then Councillor Kay.
It's got a third policy.
Right, I think a lot of us, Councillor Sanders, you do have local residents who are asked to park for free for short periods in town centres, and certainly in the main town centre closest to me, Mill Hills, Broadway, the traders there are very much in favour of half an hour free parking. Now, CPC inquired a model about how this free parking would work. So I don't know if any of you ever go across borough boundaries, but Harrow has just brought this in. On all their parking meters, 20 minutes free parking. Now their parking charges are 22 for hours as well. You can park there for an hour for 30 pence. And apart from in the very middle of Harrow, you have to go to extensive car parks, but anywhere else you can. And I quite often park in their car parks when I go to a hospital, which is quite frequently. Now, the way it works is that if you just hold the free time, and 20 minutes for me going to a hospital for a blood test, it's just time to go there, that's fine. Then you go to the machine, put in your number, get a ticket for free parking. If you want to park for longer than that, you don't get the free parking, you pay the total amount. So if I want to stay there for an hour, I would pay for an hour. I wouldn't get 20 minutes free parking and have to come out then and do something else. So that's the way it works. We charge more, whether or not we should or not going to go into now, but you can still work on that measure. Free parking is free parking, if you want to take the longer, you pay.
Councillor Kay.
Policy for?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And I think that 30 minutes free parking is more likely to keep spaces at 85% because at the moment I think that in the borough there are 30-minute parking spaces where you pay £1 for the 30 minutes, as in Town Fortune, which we're coming up to later. The thing is that if you arrive at a parking space, you have to pay just £1 by phone. When sometimes you have to hang on for 10 minutes or more before being able to do so, and that's 10 minutes gone, if not more. And in practical terms, someone who's going to park free of charge for 30 minutes won't pay in advance probably on arrival for a longer parking period, they'll just park, shop and go. And it is time to actually it does give you time without having to pay to actually go into a shop and do something, even a couple of shops. So I think that it could actually ease the parking situation where there's a lot of heavy parking to the 85%, to minimise it to 85%. I think the park, shop and go thing is really encouraged by 30 minutes.
Okay. Last point, Councillor Williams.
No. Amendment.
I think it's been misunderstood. When I said people should leave after half an hour, that they will be half-hour bays. Deliberately so that for quick turnover. There will still be other bays which were for longer term, but some bays would literally for half-hour at a time.
So it's not going to be a blanket half an hour free?
No,
not blanket.
Certain bays, so to speak.
Only certain days are going to be half an hour free?
Yeah.
Right. So as long as we've got that in it.
This is yet another policy.
Yes, another policy.
Because Councillor Schneider is arguing for half an hour free every
At
day.
least half an hour free. Anyway, fine. So, okay, I think, so the recommendation here...
And check, before you have an answer to the costing, I asked a question about why 30-minute free parking would cost £3.2.
Depends which policy it's for, I suppose. Which policy?
I've got a breakdown for you, Councillor.
So,
Through you, Chair, what I would point out to Councillor Schneider is, however, this isn't about money. This was on the basis that I was aware that you were interested in how that was broken down, and that's why I was prepared. This isn't being done for the money, it's for the proper traffic management purposes.
yeah, thank you for that clarification. Okay, so we've got in front of us, we've gone to item, the second part, which is regarding the cash pen display meters. I say a decision has already been made on this, so this is regarding actually noting the decision of Cabinet to reconsider the possible introduction of cash pen display meters in 2015-16 municipal year. The purpose of the review of the parking policy, cash meters start and finish with our 28 April 2015 meeting. So I don't think it requires any further discussion.
I mean, I've got this item down, my recommendation, which, I'm sure I'll be moving an amendment to that recommendation. I would I disagreed, and Labour members disagreed with that recommendation at the Task and Finish group, but we feel that cash parking could be brought in immediately, and there is still a wide demand for that from traders and from residents. And likewise on the 30-minute free parking. I mean, it may be causing some issues with some members here, but this is widely wanted, demanded by traders. I don't know if Councillor Salinger should go and actually speak to some traders and ask them if they support 30-minute free parking. Do they support cash meters? And then you should listen to what they say. traders and residents say that to me. I know they say that to many of my colleagues.
Talk to lots of people.
I regularly have even traders as well.
And has anybody ever said that to you, Councillor Cohen? Has they ever asked for cash meters or free parking periods?
Originally, yes, but not now. They've got used to the system and it's working very well. And occupancy rates up, transactions are up, and the economy is thriving.
Were you sleeping when the from Temple Fortune raised that petition about?
I wasn't. I said transactions in Temple Fortune are also up. Okay. Fine. So that's you can put your change or your recommendation. You can amend the recommendation down here after we finish the third item, which is in connection with members' parking permits.
So can I have a question on that? On these figures here, on this
That's not regarding. That's regarding the first item. We're already on to the.
Well, you didn't.
No, we've only just been handed those. They can't go. You can't just be expected to be handed those.
There seems to be a fair amount of assuming and guesswork in these figures, so I don't take too much. But one particular one, reconfiguration of paint display machines, 59 machines, £500. Now, the answer to question 4 with Mr. Dishman's says that the company purchase machines on the basis that coin option could be easily be installed without any to incur significant additional costs. So I don't know where this £500 for the machine comes from.
Right.
This cost is the software within the machines will need to be reconfigured, so that's where that comes from.
So was your answer to Mr. Dishman wrong, or is this £500 wrong?
Mr. Barry answered the question and said it needs to be reconfigured.
But that's not what it says. Mr. Dishman says without, could be,
well, in the scheme of the £3 million to 20,000 is a small amount.
So you think 29,500 is not a significant amount?
In the overall context.
In the overall context of £3 million, no.
Don't worry about doing it.
Councillor Schneider.
I think what the comparison is between that was left as an option rather than having to completely replace a card machine with a cash machine.
Joe, the £500 is a lot less than getting a completely new machine at £4,000. In that sense, it is a lot cheaper.
Can I, on these costings, can I ask what is the income from paid for parking on the street and car park parking during the last full year that we've got figures for?
I assume you're referring to income in relation to the 30-minute period?
No, I'm asking for relation to people who are paid to park on the street or in car parks.
For any period?
For any period.
I believe that figure is around 3 million.
Fine, so what we're saying is that the cost of allowing people to park for 30 minutes for free is more expensive than the whole income from paid for parking.
Because the income for parking out here is 975,000.
No, but these figures are saying that the cost of introducing the 30-minute free parking period, the financial impact will be £3.2 million, more than the whole cost of money raised from people paying to park.
And so there's a difference between income. There's a difference between income from people actually paying to park and the other costs of enforcement and the other items listed there. The income figure is 975,000, right? And as you probably realise, the majority of people probably park for half an hour. I would have thought in the borough, or possibly it's probably about the same as an hour.
What I'm saying is it can't make sense to say, I understand the difference between income and the cost, but it cannot make sense to say that allowing people to park for 30 minutes free of charge would wipe out the council's entire income from parking, or would cost more. That impact would be more than the impact that's gained from all paid for parking charges.
And enforcement.
Yeah. Mr. Bragg.
Okay, so if I can just clarify what I just said earlier, that I'm referring to the first line on your spreadsheet, which is the line entitled loss of paid for parking income. Okay, if you calculate all the periods that we charge for, from the 15-minute tariff through to the all-day tariff, in total, the income we would derive in a year would be around £3 million. This calculation is the element that includes 15 minutes to 30 minutes and 33% of the 1 hour income, 1 hour tariff income. So what it's essentially showing here is that the figure of 975,000 means that those periods make up a third of the overall income in the year for local parking, all types of tariff.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I can understand what you're saying now. I haven't, gone through the figures, but what the bottom line, you're saying that the financial, it says total financial impact of introducing this is £3.2 million, and I simply do not believe that the impact of allowing people to park 30 minutes free of charge would be a net loss to the councils of £3.2 million.
Maybe we should ask the other question is how much the income from PCN income, and then you'd have the whole figure. Because at the moment you're asking one figure just for the income, and you're not wanting to understand that the first line is only related to the income. So it's 3 million related to the 975. That's the point. If you want to compare the 3 million to other income, including PCN income, then you ask how much is received from people receiving PCNs as well.
But the point is, I'm looking at the bottom line. I can't accept that the impact from just allowing people to park for 30 minutes free of charge and still charging for longer periods is going to have an impact on the council of £3.2 million, equivalent, coincidentally, equivalent to the total raised from income.
Right. How much approximately is the income of PCN's income in the borough?
In a year, we would expect it to be around about between 7 and 7.5.
Okay, so we compare it to the 7.5 plus the 3 million income on the pay by phone is that sort of figure, the 10 million pounds compared to the 3 million. That's what you should be. If you're comparing like for like, and compare like for like.
Can I ask, what's the rationale between, if you allow people to park for 30 minutes free, why is there a £2 million reduction in income from PCNs?
Because a lot of people take a chance and get caught.
In terms of if you're looking at the second idea, the impact of enforcement activity, where there's two elements. The first element is the element where codes 5 and 83 are effectively issued to the PCN for a long payment. So if you're allowing people a period to not pay for 30 minutes, then those PCNs wouldn't apply, you wouldn't be issuing. Based on the volume of PCNs issued for those offences currently, that makes up the figure of the 1.347 million.
I think that's just ridiculous because it's assuming that people are not paying, to park. There are always some people who overstay, but it's ridiculous.
That is the case.
I believe that is the case. So, right. I'm not going to go into any more on this item. We're going to have a quick on to item 3 and discussion on, well, not item 3, but the recommendation regarding members' permits.
Right. My recommendation on this item is that free parking permits for councillors are scrapped. Residents and many other people across the borough have to pay for their parking, and so should councillors. When I asked this question at council meeting last week, why Labour members were able to go about their business without having a free parking permit and Tory councillors can't, he said it was a total mystery to him. And it's a total mystery to me as well. This is an unfair perk and should be scrapped. Also, I take issue with the way this part of the report has been written. It's implying that by giving people a free permit, councillors a free permit, there is somehow a saving of money from what would happen if members claimed back parking charges. The current allowance scheme does not allow members to claim back for travel or parking costs within the borough of Barnet. Members receive an allowance, and that part of that is to cover travel costs within the borough. So my proposal is that this perk is scrapped, and there is no mechanism for members to claim that parking. They can pay for that from their allowance.
Okay, Councillor, I'll ask you another question. Okay? Obviously, when you're running a business and wherever you're doing, if you're working or you're carrying out your duties, right? And do most businesses, if they're on visiting someone or they're carrying out their duties or they're there to do you not think it's appropriate for them to be able to claim that back?
That's not the comparison.
No, I'm asking the question first.
That's not a comparison.
No, it is a comparison. It's a comparison, right? If there are members on duty and they're using the members' permit according to the conditions of that permit, right? What is the difference between claiming back like members of parliament or whoever it is, right? Claim back expenses for travelling and parking. What's the difference between a member using a permit when they're on similar business?
The difference is that the members' allowance scheme pays a basic allowance to councillors, and part of that is, as it's stated in the scheme, it includes travel costs. Therefore,
but not parking.
Well, travel costs and parking are covered within the allowances paid, so there's therefore no need for an additional perk. What makes this double? I've been out on site visits with officers, and officers find it difficult to park. They don't have these permits to allow them to park wherever they want across the borough. Officers who are going about their duty, who need to do far more site visits and visit far more properties than any councillor do, they don't have them.
Councillor Aldrin.
Chairman, I'll preface my remarks by saying I don't have a permit, so I don't really have any access to ground. I don't feel very strongly about it one way or the other. But I do think there is a difference. Councillor Schneiderman was talking about people paying for parking, but of course, so often in CPZs, there is no option for paying. It means you cannot park there. Now, because I don't have a permit, find other ways of doing it. But I'm a retired person, time is not perhaps of the same essence as it is for people who have much greater time pressures, and therefore I think the significant use is not so much the car parking in car parks, it's the use in the CPZ, and I think that does enable councillors to do their job more effectively. I'm sorry if it can't be stretched to council officers, but that's not what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about members.
Councillor Braun and Councillor Stanger.
Thank you. Well, Councillor Old has said quite a lot of what I wanted to say, but I'll talk about how I've used mine ever since we've had them. Very rarely. But when I have used them, I've been profoundly grateful because I've been able to interact with residents that I might have otherwise had a great deal of problem with. Now, with the return to 3 planning subcommittees, I believe that we are going to, the Hendon one is going to save the council a great deal of money because we won't be using, except in very rare circumstances, a minibus anymore because there's fewer of us. Well, I think I will probably be using my permit under those circumstances once a month at least. And I think this is part of the way in which I, as a councillor, can carry out my job. The suggestions that to pay and then get reimbursed is unnecessary, stupid administration. If we've got a piece of paper in our dashboard that says we can park, that's the end of it. And frankly, this is cropped up. It reminds me of, I don't know, a blue bottle in the room or something like this that goes buzz. It's irrelevant. It's cost-free to the borough. And I just don't know what all the excitement is about it. We've got far more important things to worry about.
Councillor Sandra.
in the overall scheme of things, we're talking about pennies.
Yes.
The difference to the council's income
Not even that.
and the cost of issuing them is pennies. Let's put this into perspective. I know it was the Labour Party's #1 priority in its election manifesto was to do away with members' parking permits. But it won't make a blind bit of difference to the council's budget. I have one. I use it very sparingly. And to be honest with you, the most frequent use is when I attend meetings in this council chamber, here. Meetings where I'm required to be here before 6:30. I can park at the side of the town hall without having to pay. That's how rare it gets used. But Councillor Braun and Councillor Old's right, it's actually in residence parking bays when you're visiting people, that members will actually use them more than saving on parking pay and display parking. That's the key to it. But, you know, let's also remember, and someone will tell me if I'm completely wrong, don't think I am, that it was actually Mr. Dismore who was the first person who asked for this and suggested it and advocated that it should be there and available for all members. There's a little bit of hypocrisy here somewhere.
Okay, Councillor Hart.
He can speak for himself.
Chairman, I have one of these, and I don't want to relinquish it. I use it exactly 2 hours on a Saturday morning when I park if I go and do a surgery. And I find it very nice that it gives me kind of an official feel. And it annoys the Labour Party, so that's all to the good.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. Well, with this, I do surgery Saturday mornings. You know, put my money in the pay and display and get a ticket like everybody else. It's not just the cost; it's just the principle. Parking.
You use the card meters now?
I have to pay by phone while there's no cash meters. Of course. But the point of principle is, it's not just about the cost. It's about lots of residents. People have problem having visitors coming to their houses. People have problems with traders coming to their houses. Why why Labour councillors can manage to do their job and probably do it better without a permit, I don't know. I managed to do the job as a councillor without requiring a free parking permit, and it's just wrong.
Fine, let's move on to the recommendation. Detailed in the report noting that each council decision and agrees that standard is not appropriate for town council.
All those in favour of recommendation 1, please show.
I just want to move an amendment.
You want to move an amendment, sorry. Apologies.
Yes, well, the amendment is simply that a 30-minute free parking scheme is introduced in all town centres.
Is that your law or Councillor Williams?
Amended by Councillor Williams, or?
That's my motion.
Well, we had compositing.
Okay. Is that seconded? Councillor Kay is seconded. Okay. All those in favour of Councillor Schneiderman's recommendation?
Oh, stand up, all of them. Oh.
All those against? That is lost. All those in favour of number 1 recommendation as tabled? That is carried. Item recommendation number 2.
Well, similarly, I've got an amendment for recommendation 2 as well.
Go on.
That cash parking is reintroduced to the existing meters straight away.
All those in favour?
Sorry, Chairman, is that within the council's budgetary provision?
Have you told us the middle cost not significant?
All those in favour of the amendment? All those against? that it will be reviewed in 2015. All those against? Okay. That's carried. And recommendation 3. I think we're going to...
Can I move the status quo, Chair?
Okay. Is that seconded? Okay. All those in...
The committee agrees with Councillor Cornelius that it's a mystery why certain MPs need free parking permits and that all 3 member parking permits are withdrawn.
The GLA members?
All those in favour of Councillor Scheideman's amendment?
GLA members?
All those against? Okay, that's lost. All those in favour of Councillor Salinger's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Scannell. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Okay, we're now going to call back Mr. Dishman.
Mr. Dishman.
I'm going to make a comment first and then you'll follow your questions. So you've got 3 minutes for your comment, followed by your supplementary questions.
Thank you. The Council's reputation is largely founded on collecting dustbins, cleaning streets and parking enforcement. The reputation for parking probably couldn't get much lower. The reason for this is that whatever the Council might say to the Council is revenue raising from the issue of PCNs. The proof comes in paragraph 5.2.2 of the response to Alan's members item, which shows that a reduction in parking income would have an impact on projects, or that funding for them would have to come from the general fund, which is of course what the general fund is for. I sat through the judicial review on parking permit pricing, in fact probably supplied half the evidence as well, and the judge rejected the argument that prices could be increased to plug a hole in the budget. The Council needs to wean itself off any reliance on parking ticket income and should treat it as a useful bonus in the year after a surplus has been generated. The other reason why we know that the projected annual surplus on the special parking account is actually a target, although not in name, is that if there is the slightest danger that the projected surplus will be missed, a parking improvement plan gets put in place to make sure that the projected surplus is achieved. As soon as the Council starts to concern itself by the effect on the budgets of other services, of policy decisions, then you are using parking income as a revenue-raising measure. Please stop. Now, councillors, it is you who decide policy, not officers. They have given you a suggested parking policy, and that is all it is, a suggestion. I've already had a good go at it by submitting 30 questions to make the council reflect if it is going the best way about things. Okay, it's fine. So if you want 10 minutes grace after paid for parking on single yellow lines, and 5 minutes for everything else except for terrible naughtiness, such as parking on pedestrian crossing zigzags, a PCN to be cancelled if the wrong location gets used, a PCN to be cancelled if the wrong vehicle registration gets used, a PCN for a blue badge holder to be cancelled once they show they hold a valid blue badge, then say so today and take a vote on it. If you don't want spy cards, parking sensors, enforcement on bank holidays, bailiffs sent out to pensioners and the disabled, traffic wardens parked illegally, then make those policies today and improve the reputation of the council and make Barnet a better place for its residents.
I'm mindful of time. So anyone got any comments or questions, Mr. Dishman? Let's try them.
Thank you. I just wondered, Mr. Dishman, based on your wide experience on parking, what are the one or two key things you think should be in this parking policy? Or in the Barnet parking policy?
I think more leeway definitely on the pay by phone, because that not paying for parking leads to over 30,000 PCNs a year, and I'll bet when you could pay by cash it wasn't like that.
Can we move on to...
Sorry, can I just ask one more question? Based on your, I know you go to a lot of PATAS parking appeals, and I believe have a fair success rate. From the other side, though, we're looking at how we can improve the council's position. What could the council do to make you less successful at your PATAS hearings?
Well, you could sack NSL for a start, because they're absolutely hopeless from the start of issuing the ticket. If you might recall, I made that little joke on Parking Mad about them being like courgettes and appearing when your back is turned. The process seems pretty poor, the way in which they respond to letters, full of grammatical errors, factual errors. It's all marvellously appalling from my point of view. And then on PATAS evidence packs, well, only last week they sent me somebody else's evidence, and somebody's kindly cancelled that ticket now because I don't think they want to see the wrong evidence in front of PATAS. A number of other boroughs aren't. Some are better, but they still make mistakes, fortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Shushman. Okay, now you can go on to your questions. Let's say it's 5 to 9, on the last 10 o'clock, so an underwriting and what it is, the actual discussion of the policy is fine. So remind me where we were. Well, there's quite a few questions. About 30 of them. I don't know how many follow-ups. Okay, right. So number 8.
No, I said no to that, no to 9.
10.
Oh, it's current practice. That's 3 words. What current practice? So question 10, that's 3 words. It says that the council have identified current policy as called with somebody's current practice, but it won't be a great justification if it's the council's own current practice.
Right.
I think actually that is a clarification of the way that's drafted. What we're saying is that the proposals that we're putting forward in the policy that agreed to it in that consultation, it has the same periods of time for each of the various contraventions as we operate to now. That's essentially what that's saying.
Number 10.
Number 11, do you have a time scale for this, please?
Right.
We'll come back on it.
Number 12.
Very simple. Please can I be sent the figures for the last 6 months?
13.
Nothing on 13. Nothing on 14.
15.
Yes. How will the withdrawal of long-standing concessions without proper notice to every resident possibly lead to clearer understanding? And of course, we've had Selwood Drive recently.
there isn't an intention with this to withdraw current concessions, but clearly, as any particular footway parking location is contested, or there is an issue with that area, the intention is then to look at the area, the objective criteria, and introduce proper marked and signed areas. In the meantime, current concessions will be in place.
So an original asked for a list of them.
Can that be provided, Mr. Dushman?
We can have this.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing on that, or 17. Number 18, would you like my suggestions once you've identified the size of the problem? As I'm a debt collector after all.
I'm sure they'll take you up on your offer. 19.
Isn't Appendix 15 far too vague? Because it's open to virtually any interpretation that the notice processing officer fancies.
Could you repeat what you said?
Well, I was just thinking that you used to have this lovely document, cancellation procedure, setting out a policy for each type of crime prevention, and now you've got this vague one that says, we'll sort of think about it, and I think you could do a whole lot better than that.
Through you, Chair. We'd be delighted to have that as a suggestion, as a point in the consultation, and yes, we would certainly consider it.
20.
Has anyone told the NSL of this policy? Sorry, that's the policy of letting blue badge holders off the first offence. And presumably that's per year, not per ever.
Yes, if the issue has been dealt with by NSL without our knowledge, yes, they are aware of it, and clearly if they refer to us, then we'll deal with it accordingly.
Nothing on that, or 22. 23, within 28 days of what exactly?
The 23. From the issuance of the PCN.
Mind you don't break the law because you can't issue it until after 28 days have expired. Right, nothing on 24 or 25, effective your honesty on 25, most refreshing. Nothing on 26, 27, 28, 29, even I was getting bored. Number 30. When was this policy about vulnerable individuals introduced? Because I asked for it several times a few months ago and it didn't exist.
Right. It isn't a policy. It is, as I believe we've made you aware previously, the contracts between, or the contract with bailiff companies is a contract between NSL and the two bailiff companies, not a contract with the council. One of the requirements of us in terms of being confident that the bailiff companies that were being engaged by NSL was that we wanted to see that they had a process in terms of how they deal with that kind of individuals, and those documents have been provided to us. We've gone through them and we're happy that they are robust in terms of how they deal with vulnerable individuals.
Number 31, again, the time scale. When's this going to be thought about, please?
Through you, Chair. obviously we'll deal with it as part of the consultation on the policy and introduce it at that point.
Yeah, it's the same, so the same answer, so it's fine. 33. Is parking in this way, by traffic wardens, wherever they like, legal if it's not in the traffic management order?
Right.
I've got a question actually. I'd refer straight to the contract in terms of what the contract has stipulated in terms of the way the MSL vehicles are used. And that's what's represented in the answer, but that's certainly something that I'll investigate further.
Thank you. 34. Why not spend some money on a proper education programme to see if it makes a difference to ongoing behaviours, good old nudge theory?
Right.
As was mentioned in the answer, there is a parking improvement programme in place that we're working through at the moment for various activities, and we believe that a lot of the improvements in that programme will certainly be beneficial.
35. That's it. Thank you very much. Okay. Comments, parking policy.
Chairman, this is a long report. I'm very conscious of time as well. It's a draft. It's going out for consultation. The time for a proper full debate on it is when we have finished the consultation and we've got the views of the members of the public and all those other people who want to respond to it. That's my comment. Let's get it out there, get it into the public domain and have a proper consultation on it.
I would certainly emphasise that routine paragraph 1.13. The policy deals with the current lack of an objective policy position on illegal footway parking. Well, this is a growing thing. People will park on footways because very often the roads are clogged up. And eventually one gets round to giving them somebody marks 2 wheels on, 2 wheels off. And it's very useful. And others, I won't mention the street will go on and pester the poor people. They park actually at night on the broad footpath. Plenty of room for everybody. I dare say it's illegal, I don't care. If they're out in the road, somebody will hit them. It's quite simple. There's no rules to work both sides. So this policy needs real clarification, and could I suggest that it be used two wheels on parking, maybe even 4 wheels parking, be encouraged, because there are more cars coming on the road all the time.
In the appropriate places.
Oh, absolutely. Most of them will be, yes, it will be where streets are very narrow, where access is obviously very difficult, and you're causing accidents by parking, and people will park on both sides.
Okay. Councillor Trinan.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, on footway parking, I mean, I think, it's right to consult, and it's fine to mark up areas. I do wonder if it is a bit of a hammer sledge and nut to crack a nut in the sense that there are places where footway parking is currently allowed as a concession, but I think it should be possible to ticket in those locations where somebody's causing a general obstruction or park dangerously without needing to give somebody a ticket because they've got 2 wheels on the curb. I think there is a difference between those two things, and any policy needs to recognise that. Can I ask a question about, there's a bit in here about councillor input into PCN appeals that I had a concern about. It seems to say, I can't find the page now, but that that councillors wouldn't be permitted to make representations on behalf of residents anymore on parking bills, and we would simply have to tell them to go to Pasco. So I presume this goes to Mr. Mustard.
It is important to know that under the TMA, page
104, for the form of appeals, it's important that under the TMA, elected members, councillors, MPs, MEPs not influence the outcome of representation against the BCN. I think that's understandable that it can't influence, but they can represent the position of their residents, I would have thought.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's not exactly the position. I didn't want any indication that we couldn't do that. Obviously, it's not our decision, but, you know, I do feel entitled to be able to put the case if I feel a resident can give a part.
Absolutely. Right.
There is a really important issue here, which is one of the reasons why this is suggested, and that is that if you give motorists the view that an alternative for it to going through the statutory process is to engage with their councillors, and that will be enough in order for them to potentially have the ticket cancelled, that actually wouldn't be enough, and if it was pursued by us all the way through, they could lose their statutory rights by going through that process. And that is a point that has been noted by the adjudicators. So, you know, our recommendation is that anybody who approaches the councillor at the early stages should be told that they need still to go through the statutory process in order that they don't lose that right.
So can a sort of amendment be made that says that if a resident comes to a member, they have to be advised that they should still challenge the BCN if that's what they feel, but as soon as they've done that, a member still not represented, even if that's at that point.
Yeah. No, that's correct. It's really important that the impression isn't given that that's all that a motorist needs to do, that they are told that they need to equally go through the statutory process.
It's not very clear here. I think it should be reduced to something like I've just said.
There is also the point within the guidance. The guidance is suggesting that there could be an undue influence on officers, and officers could feel pressured to cancel, and that really shouldn't be the case. So that's the point the guidance is making, as well as the issue about the importance of going through the statutory process.
I understand exactly what Mr. Bragg is saying. I have to say this is the first time in my memory that any officer has spelt that out to me as a member of the council, and I'm now in my 33rd year.
Yeah.
I think it would be very helpful, probably coming from Pam, if an advisement was circulated to all members on how to deal with residents raising and asking us to represent them when they've received the parking notice.
Councillor Shine, are you happy with that?
I don't know I'm not sure what conclusion we come to, but I understand that there's a formal process, but I totally that it's no undue pressure should ever be put on an officer. But I think there's just some way of retaining the right for members to make representations.
I think that's been clarified. That still is a position that members can represent residents with the BCN, but they also have to be advised that they should also challenge that as well.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to raise a point about CPZ procedures and consultation. That's 23 of the report, 53 on the agenda pagination. And that's really just to seek a little bit more elaboration or a more definitive statement. I'm quite happy with procedures to be very clearly documented, but I'm just a little bit concerned that we're trying to establish a situation where we're going to define when we will agree a CPZ and when we won't. I think that's crying for the moon, quite honestly, and I think that we should try to make it totally clear to people that we will lay down the procedures, but the interpretation results and all that sort of thing must be done on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, noted. Slocum.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask a question on footway parking. Right. I just want to ask the officers a question, because this is something I'm concerned about for a long time. Residents always get hammered with parking. I'm talking about the residents that live on the Edgware Highway Road. They can't park on the pavements. It's not allowed. But big heavy lorries from businesses can come with all their heavy goods and park on top of the pavements, and nothing is said. Nothing is done, nothing is monitored, and if you look and see all the pavements are being cracked because they're so heavy. But we always hammer the residents. Why? Can't we do, have we got some impact with business? Business should have the same rules. Do not park those heavy vehicles on the pavement, because it's costing us money. Thank you.
I think it's a very good point to make, Councillor, that obviously it's a problem we can't be everywhere all the time. We do catch people, and obviously one of the things that would really help us is when residents find somebody, large vehicles parked on the pavements, because they are, destroying our pavements in some areas. So I think one of the policy issues and kind of picking up a sort of consultation is getting people to actually report that to us, because it's extremely helpful if people do see a lorry parked on the pavement. So that could be part of the publicity we do around this policy.
Okay, yeah, I've got a couple of comments. I've raised this before with officers. I have concerns regarding people being issued PCNs when parked in front of their own drive. Obviously, sometimes there is a yellow line, but if there is a yellow line in front, that means they're obviously in the CPZ, and if they're not, then they're not going to get a ticket, usually. So I think it's a bit unfair that someone parks in front of their own drive in a CPZ gets a ticket, if someone outside the CPZ parked in front of the drive doesn't get a ticket. So I think that there's something should be done that the people parked in front of their drive in the CPZ should be some sort of mechanism there.
And I think the other point I had was in connection with suspensions. I know in other boroughs, and I've also seen this borough also does it, that when a bay is suspended but not actually in use of its actual what they've asked for it to be suspended for, something's done there. Maybe it could be that there is times attached to that suspension when it's required, instead of at the moment it's 24 hours a day, even though the restrictions and people doing building works are not using 24 hours a day. I think this edition also made a similar point within one of those questions.
Yeah, just clarification on PCN 8.8. My understanding, according to a London Council's meeting last week, that a ticket can only be issued whether if it's handed to the person or put on the windscreen. But here it seems to be saying something else there.
What page is that, Chairman?
32.
Yes, you can do. If someone's driven away, it's particularly something one might do around schools where people have, witnessed it myself, parked dangerously badly. That's out on zigzag lines and then drive away. You've got the record of the CEO has seen it, then you do it more closely.
Fine. I think, obviously, as Councillor Sanders said, this is going out. Last point, but as I say, Councillor Sanders made the point that it's going out consultation with members. I would encourage them to also respond to this paper and write into their comments if they've got any further comments. But Councillor Schreiner, correct your attention.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just check, I mean, we made various comments, but can some of these actually be incorporated into the policy that goes out to consultation rather than just be considered as a contribution to the consultation?
Amend it then. Do you remember the board?
It is due to go out to consultation on Monday, so if there's something that we'll consider what people are saying, so if there were some very minor amendments, then we can do it.
Just amend it.
Maybe my point made on suspensions, I think maybe that's one point of going. Is there any other points that you wanted to go in?
Well,
if it's possible. If it's possible.
Well, yeah, I mean, we talked about suspension, you know, we talked about a bit about the councillor input bit, the points made on footway parking. I also just wanted to raise the issue of, you know, babies and vulnerable people, and whether, you know, if we're having a parking policy, I think that should actually be part of our policy, that we will deal, you know, sensitively with vulnerable people, and, you know, I think that should be part of the policy, it should be part of what goes out to consultation.
The policy that says something as a general fact.
Okay, I think.
Part of the contract with NSL with their bailiffs rather than part of the parking policy.
Okay, and as to the point about the in front of private driveways as well, if I can.
That's a suggestion, rather than, because obviously rewriting the policy, you know, to go out for the consultation, a bit complicated, but if we do a summary of what people have raised tonight and do that as, you know, this is what the committee commented, I mean, that should be straightforward.
It's taken as part of the response.
And we'll submit that out, put that out with the policy consultation.
Yeah, that's the reason people are able
It's just going into
As long as there's an addendum which will show comments from committee.
Yeah,
To show his writing.
that whole section that talks about grace periods, and I think one of the questions that was raised was about, you know, government changing regarding introducing a 10-minute grace period. I just wondered whether, as we are developing, it would be worth future-proofing our policy and making reference to that, or if that's the government policy, we could be ahead of the game and actually consult on that as one of the options.
Yes.
Fine. Okay. Thank you very much. That all noted, and now that addendum will be prepared. Okay. Now move on to so there's the recommendation. The Environment Committee approves the proposed draft policy for public consultation. Number 2, the Environment Committee approves the consultation engagement plan for the consultation of the parking policy and authorises officers to commence the consultation on 28th of July and finish on the 20th of October or other appropriate dates as soon as possible if these cannot be met. And then third point, that the results of the consultation will be reported back to the Environment Committee on the 18th of November together with office recommendation and a revised policy if appropriate. I will also add in that to ask officers to put in the addendum comments made by this committee. That's number 4. Has anyone got any other concerns?
Can I just on the timescale of consultation, racking my brains, I'm trying to look in my diary here, but I can't find it. When the next lot of area forum meetings are?
In October.
Yes, I know, but we've got a closing date here, the 20th of October. That the closing date ought to be after the next lot of area forum.
Okay, well, it's 22nd, so I guess it says it can go a bit after that, I guess. Is it possible to do a bit after that?
I know it's getting very tight.
We will do everything we can to include that. It may well be that we'll be already consulting on the draft report at that point, but if we can build it in, we will. Absolutely.
Well, I think if those comments can still come back to even this committee that's made at the Area Environment Committee, and then that can all be put together. Yeah, fine. So, can I ask for agreement? Agree all three recommendations, all four recommendations? Agreed? Thanks. Item 8, consultation on new highway plans and procedures.
Chairman, we have
Very
Mark
quick
Rees.
introduction.
We have Mark Rees Williams here from Reed to introduce it. I suggest we keep that to 5 minutes.
Would you mind if we went straight into comments on the report? Yeah, I think we're going to comments. I'm sure everyone's read the papers and.
Chairman, are these papers available to the public as well?
Can I just make a point that the council are now on paperless policy, and tonight we've been handed these massive documents. This particular document, some of the pages have just got one phone number on each page. So I'd just like to say that I didn't think, and they're very high quality paper, I don't think that this sort of behaviour is really in line with what we're trying to do for the council.
Okay, I'd say we'll kick off with some comments on these three papers under the item highway planning procedures. Councillor Old.
Sorry, this first point may sound rather pedantic on pages. On page 125. Sorry. Somebody's got their. The percentages come to 120%. I assume that probably the last. The fourth item should be 75%, not 95%. So if it's going out to public consultation, then that hasn't been picked up, I hope it will be. There's quite a number of pages here, 10-page section, page 153 to 162, which are, well, either blank or illegible or whatever, and I just wondered if there was anything in those pages that we ought to be concerned about.
I think generally some of the documents are draft, and some of the blanks, particularly where they've probably photocopied, for instance, photographs and images and things which will be put into the final version. There's some instances of that. I don't think there's anything in there of any importance that's going through.
Thank you.
Just right after it's
I didn't quite understand on page 179 about the overall planned maintenance programme. It talks about the programme running at half the cost of the deterioration, and it says the cost is affordable. Does that mean the cost that if we're only dealing with half of the deterioration is affordable? And is even this realistic, or is it pie in the sky?
No, I know time is tight, but could I just draw everyone's attention to this little handout thing that I've given, because the documents are such large documents. Even if you don't get a chance to read it now at the committee, afterwards you might find it useful. There's a summary sheet for each one. If I take members, for instance, on that point to page 10 and page 11 of the handout. This is a really important question made about deterioration and the fact of keeping up with highway maintenance. There's an interesting fact in there for members about carriageways. The rate of resurfacing of carriageways may surprise members to be every 100 years, footways every 140 years. So this concept of keeping up with the deterioration, as you quite rightly raised, is a very important point in why this network recovery plan is being brought forward and aired with yourselves to understand this key issue. Currently at the moment, with the money that's put forward, we do about 50,000 square metres, and fortuitously the maths is quite good really, because it's 5 million square metres of carriage that you've got. So, but this is a good point you've raised really, is that we have this asset, it's nominally valued at £1.3 billion, whatever you want to take, and every day out there it's deteriorating in value, unless we're able to keep that value going. So it's a really key responsibility. These plans, that network recovery plan, is in fact an addendum to the highway asset management plan we already have. So that's why it is an important document to be aired and to get users from.
Okay, Councillor Sands, then Councillor Schneiderman, and then myself, and Mr. Myers in today, so we'll have this up.
Can I just ask you about Appendix C, the high priority items that are listed there on page 151, items 3 and item 5. So I can tell you what they are. Item 3 is the North Circular Road, eastbound to the borough boundary with Enfield and Harrow. This is a complete and utter nightmare, but there's nothing the borough can do about it. It's the North Circular Road, it's a TfL road, but the knock-on effect of the failure of the £25 million that was spent to improve that part of the North Circular has left rat-running traffic going both ways. If you can see the traffic at Tesco's, you go off and you either go up to Barnet or you go up to Muswell Hill and rejoin the North Circular further round. And that means that Barnet Road gets congested, which means that all the other roads around there become used by the traffic that ought to be on Barnet Road that isn't. But no one has suggested a solution to it, and it's not within our powers to do it.
Well, very quickly, we've managed to sum up all the challenges of the network management plan in terms of congestion. In the limited time I've got, the key point I'd like to make is that if there's going to be any chance of making these things happen, working together, the investment that's gone into this picture here is relevant in that it shows all the stakeholders, all the people who have an influence in making congestion. And over on the right-hand side is Transport for London. So this document, this particular document has been compiled through a working group, which compiles emergency planning people, TfL. You are absolutely right. Many of the issues on major congestion are very difficult to solve. Some of them are solvable, and those are the ones which we've got to concentrate on or recommend to concentrate.
And the other one, which is listed as a high priority, is the High Road West conjunction with Totteridge Lane, which has been talked about for all of my time as a councillor, long time as a councillor. We missed the opportunity to do it when the corner site with Boots, which is now Boots, was being redeveloped some 15, 20 years ago. But I don't know, and everyone who's looked at it has just sort of walked away and said there's nothing we can do. Again, we don't have control over the timing of the signals.
What the document has done really in a way is galvanised or brought together a lot of this information, and the key reason for this particular document is it's a legal duty under the traffic management authority to doesn't necessarily need you to be able to do everything, but it is a legal duty that you have it.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is that these two are listed as the high priority ones. They've been a high priority, well, certainly Totteridge Lane, the High Road West, for over 20 years, probably longer. And no one's ever managed to find a solution.
Through you, Chair. No, I absolutely agree with you, Councillor Sanger. In the short time I've been here, they've been top of my list as well, and I absolutely accept that they're very difficult to deal with. if we don't keep them high on the list and we don't keep talking to those who can help with trying to resolve those issues, they won't be solved. And it may well be, I would admit, maybe 10, 20 years before they actually get something happens. But we do need to keep them on the list.
Thank you, Chairman. One of my points actually was related to, I know this is helpful what you've just handed out now. I mean, if these are going out to consultation, can an even simpler version of this be produced that actually, well, particularly thinking if members of the public were to take the time to look at this, that would actually highlight some of the key things that they might actually want to, have input in. I mean, as a simpler guide than this.
Yeah, well, there's an attempt to do that with a one-page summary, more or less at the start of each of those sections. That's to summarise all the documents, to be honest. So, I see there will be key stakeholders take traffic management that we will use the working group to get technical issues out of those people. The network recovery plan, we probably sort of develop design guide maybe or something.
Well, yeah, I mean, on the development design guide, there's some very interesting pictures on the back page, and there's a set of pictures at the bottom that look like marked unacceptable, which, although I can admit they don't look quite as good as those pictures in the row above, marked acceptable, they still look far better than most of the roads and places in Barnet.
Well, the development design guide obviously is all about the things that come into the front end of the network, the things that are being built new. I mean, the reason that myself as a maintenance engineer are interested in this is because once they get built, we'll be looking after them for, as you just said, 100 years. So we want them built properly, and we also want them built to coherent styles for different areas, and we also want people who are designing them to understand the issues of whole costs and on to them. What was any suggestions, to be honest? There's a lot more information than that in the full documents. There's pages and pages of
I mean, sorry, is this all about starting, is this just about new developments? I mean, what would this have to say to somebody? I mean, yeah, residents are most concerned about potholes, state of pavements, state of the roads, and, would probably be most concerned about your statement that, they're only going to get done every 140 years.
The only bit that applies, well, they all have some links, but the one that's links to potholes, to answer your question, is the network recovery plan. That is the one which is about having a realistic funding plan for the authority to deal with potholes, and also to have more plan maintenance and hopefully high levels of satisfaction with the public, and to encourage economic growth, all good reasons to use a highway network. Just the network recovery plan is the particular strategy that we would like members to take due note of and give their views on.
I mean, the key question is it relevant without knowing resources that go behind it?
Well, this actually, an item under resources came about the potential capital sum of up to 60 million for investment into our highways between now and 2020. It's a substantial amount of money. So it is a priority of this authority, and thank you for that. Councillor Hart and myself, and Councillor Scanlon, and then I want to close out.
Thank you for that. I would like a copy of this. We just ran out when it reached me. If you've got a spare one. Yeah, you can't sit around. Thank you. That's a new one. Thank you very much. The other thing is, my comments are, and I'm interested to see that you talk about the number of services, different services, which is going to last a long time. I'm concerned about the environment, and would you be champion for designing something or other in the borough? Here's my opportunity to speak. It seems to me you want to change. I've noticed you want to remove, obviously, the slabs on pavements, and if possible, put down bituminous surfaces, which are going to be grey and horrible. They can be coloured. Could you think in terms of varying the colour scheme in a dull sort of way for roads and pavements, as one always tells the developers to do this to their shapes of their buildings? The other point in which expertise, I suppose, is in street trees. You don't talk about them very much here. If you're going to do some very permanent plantings, could you bear in mind that perhaps the surfaces of footways and roads does affect the growth of trees, and trees are really the big amenity, the thing that creates a pleasant surface for the human being as he walks along what is increasingly a concrete world in which we live. I could make quite the Arboricultural Association, for instance, has done a lot of work on special pits and so on to plant trees so that they don't upset the roads, because the nuisance is people complain about bloody tree moving or tripping up over it. I actually severed my Achilles tendon on a tree in the borough. I said absolutely nothing about it, because that might mended it, you know, in the plaster. Yes, just to say a little anecdote, because I knew what had happened, they'd come on and cut the roots of the tree off. So I said nothing, it's a tree I had planted anyway. So could you take those two points? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Scannell and...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do the officers have records of the numbers of cars that are coming through using this borough on roads such as the A5, which is mentioned quite frequently in your schedule? Because you refer to improving signage or junction layout. Well, these cars are coming, it's increasing weekly, and no amount of improving signage or junction layout is going to solve the problem, because you've got too many cars coming down to these junctions, Apex Corner, Sterling Corner. It's just a nightmare. So I don't want you to waste your money on looking at improving these, because they're constantly being improved. We've just had, I don't know, thousands on Melbourne Circus. They've widened the road, and it's actually made it a million times worse. So dangerous to cross that roundabout. So do we have statistics on the amount of cars that are coming through our borough in major roads?
Very good answer.
Yeah, TM information on particularly strategic routes. Less information on traffic flows on the other roads, but lots of information on the main networks that we're talking about.
Can you obtain that for Councillor Scannell?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and then finally, I agree with Councillor Hart, both his points. I have concerns regarding the removal of paving slabs, and I would ask that it's not so explicit in here in terms of like saying that you're going proposing to put that out, and have a number of other options, including could be asphalt. Also, looking at like the bonded gravel, and it doesn't mention that here, and all those other options could be looked at, and possibly to consult with residents of those roads that, let's say, they may need doing, if we can do it, but we'd be happy with this surface, and maybe consult with the individual roads. And finally, also the tree thing, I think is also a very important point. We need to have the correct material and around trees to prevent or at least limit damage to our footways.
John, very briefly, Appendix D gives a list of what are called statutory companies and associations, who I assume are the people we're going to send the consultation to. It includes the likes of Barnet Cycling. I can't see the disability groups in Barnet in here, and I think they should be added to that list.
I'm going to move over to the recommendations.
I just want to agree with you, Chairman.
Are you disagreeing with me?
Yes.
Good.
Gosh, you've done it.
On the item about removing tarmac, I think various things can be considered as options, but I wouldn't support a policy where there's a blanket policy of replacing pavements with tarmac in streets.
I think that would be one of the recommendations to have that wording adjusted before that goes out to consultation. So, recommendation 1, which is tabled, is everyone happy with that? Agreed? Yes? Okay, agreed? Councillor Schneiderman?
Yes.
Good. Item 2, is everyone happy with that? Okay, and can I put recommendation 3, maybe Councillor Stein wants to propose the recommendation for asking for that, those would be amended to include, or to amend that, so it's not actually taking out payments, that an option for other surfaces can be considered, including asphalt and maybe bonded gravel and all other options.
Usually covers two, you cover concrete.
Well, that covers under the bonded gravel, I mean, it's different colours, it's different surfaces. Is that okay, Councillor?
Yeah, the point is not about not having a blanket policy.
Absolutely.
Can I just add to the recommendation about having I don't know, I mean, I thought a form of this going out to consultation with it, so it does help guide people through.
At the end of the documents, there are single one-sheet summaries of each of the 4 documents, which we were going to use as the primary method to publicise the consultation.
And maybe say on that the more detailed report is available on the website or something.
Yes, because people won't read the whole.
Okay. Is that all agreed then? Okay. Fine, thank you. I'm running around. Okay. Temple Fortune. Anyone who wants to brag if we can speak on this item? So I'll move straight to the comments by members. Councillor Kay.
Thank you. I want to ask just a few brief questions. And the first question doesn't need an answer now, I just like it to be considered. How would the way the consultation was conducted in 2013 be improved to get a higher response than 7%? When in 2014 the petition was received with more than 2,000 signatures. A petition is not a response to consultation, but a proactive measure by those who feel strongly about something. So there obviously was a lot of feeling about it. And I just wondered, though local businesses and traders were contacted, there's nothing in the report about residents being contacted at all. I just suppose that the petition was signed predominantly by residents and those who park in Temple Fortune. The report claims that the introduction of the free 30 minutes will encourage more motorists to park, an increase in local traffic and vehicle emissions, which would result in motorists cruising in the air looking for space. But I think evidence shows that none of these would be the case. The report doesn't take into account the specific nature of this area, and I'd urge this to be taken into consideration when the investigations are carried out. It's an area that attracts a lot of parking from outside of the area, and in addition to local residents. There's a specialist number of shops, Jewish kosher shops, that are only available in such number here in the Golders Green Road. And they attract shoppers from all over the northwest and West London, and from outside London where such shops are unavailable. Therefore, there's always a high demand for parking, greater than merely for local shoppers. And the demand is particularly heavy on Thursdays, Fridays and Sunday mornings. And parking days here operate between 9 AM and 5:30 Monday to Saturday, yet most of the shops in the town centre close on Saturday, and parking days are easy to come by on that day, but some days are very crowded. There's also residents are not consulted, yet there's an exceptionally high proportion in this area of elderly and very elderly local residents. They need to park near the shops, or they need to be driven to and parked a very short walk from the shops. And payment methods for them are difficult, and 30 minutes free parking would help them to avoid the stress and technical challenge of paying, while 30 minutes would give them enough time to carry out the errand. The report mentions the worry about flow of traffic, but it doesn't mention that Temple Fortune actually is unusual in that it has exceptionally broad pavements. And the parking bays on the Hampshire Gardens suburb side are actually right on the pavements, and there's still a very wide pavement behind it. And so the prevention of the flow of traffic on that side of the main road, it doesn't exist because all the lanes are free. The other thing that the report mentions is the underused parking bays, and this is where your work, you're saying, would be carried out to monitor these bays. But in fact, it's pretty obvious on site that there aren't many shops in that area where these bays are unused. It's not in the centre where the supermarkets, the Jewish shops, cafes, clothes shops, pharmacies, etc., the everyday shops are. And they're near to the entrance of the North Salakila and 2 or more blocks uphill to the shopping centre. And this is not a young people's shopping centre where people will park and walk uphill for a couple of blocks or more to get to the shops. So these underused bays will continue to remain underused even if the charge is reduced. So they may as well be free parking days for 30 minutes or for 2 hours. So the argument for 30-minute free parking in Temple Fortune, I would say, is one of the points I made earlier, that it avoids having to pay the pound by phone, which sort of takes up time. And someone who's going to park free of charge for 30 minutes won't pay in advance on arrival for a longer parking period. They'll park, shop and go. At present, motorists do cruise around the area looking for parking spaces, but 30 minutes free parking would free up more spaces in a shorter space of time, making more spaces available and reduce this practice, making it more environmentally friendly. I think 15 minutes of free parking is just not long enough to pay or to do any shopping.
Okay, so it's
that's all actually, that's all.
Yeah, because I'm very conscious I've still got a couple of items to get
Just
to.
one last sentence. That 30 minutes free parking would fulfil the aims of the report, which is to support the local economy, convenience for motorists and ensure traffic management. And thank you for letting me have
Councillor Sandon, very quickly.
Very quickly, Chairman. My first point is, there's no plan here which actually tells me what the definition of Temple Fortune is. Listening to Councillor Kay, I think she was talking about a much wider area than what I understand to be Temple Fortune.
I wasn't actually.
No, I think I fully understand. I will sum up.
There's no plan here which would be needed to have. My second point, very quickly, Chairman, is we discussed earlier tonight the whole question of 30-minute free parking in town centres. We made a decision on it. I don't see any reason why Temple Fortune should be exempt from what we were talking about in the borough.
I'm just going to Councillor Schreiber, I've got still 2 items to go to. No. I'm just going to agree with Councillor Kay on a couple of items. Agree on a couple of items, not all of them. You said about, I'm fully aware of all the bays you're talking about, by Clarendon Court, by Dudley Court, by all of those blocks, and they are underused. And potentially one solution could be elements of free parking at that end. However, at the other end, where you say people are driving around looking for spaces, that is referring to the other end where all the anchor stores are, the Marks and Spencers, the Waitrose, all the butchers, the bakers. That's where the busy section is, and I don't believe a solution of half an hour free across Temple Fortune is a solution. However, I do believe that a solution could be made in terms of the outskirts to allow people to walk, giving them long free parking so they can walk into, use the shops by that location, but also walk into the main part of Temple Fortune. So, I mean, even over the weekend, I had an email from a shopkeeper in Temple Fortune saying they need restrictions on Sunday, because as you said before, Sunday is a very busy day, and with no restrictions, people that are wanting to shop can't shop. Because there's nowhere to park. Not only that, the residents that are living above shops are parking in the pen display spaces on Sunday because they can, and again, not allowing space for the shoppers. So again, each individual location is separate and needs to be considered, and I would put a recommendation that we make changes to Temple Fortune, not to the half an hour free for across the thing, but look at elements of Temple Fortune where there's underutilisation to improve it and to try and encourage parking in those locations. And I think that should be worked up and potentially go back to this committee with a recommendation in the next committee. Is that possible?
Yes, Chair. But obviously, if we bring it back here in November, it will delay implementation because after that, we need to go to policy and resources.
consultation with myself and Councillor Schneider.
I'm not so clear. Are you amending the recommendations? I've just got the minutes of the last policy performance committee. It said officers provide a report with recommendations on possible introduction of free parking in Temple Fortune, and I don't see a report on the possible introduction of free parking in Temple Fortune.
Where are you referring to?
I'm referring to the minutes of the last policy and resources committee where it says officers resolve that officers provide a report with recommendations on the possible introduction of free parking in Temple Fortune to be considered by the Environment Committee on 24th of July.
We've already said that they're looking at elements of free parking within Temple Fortune. So that we need to decide which bays and how long and etc. etc. We need to look at that and have a proposal coming back to well, not come back, but even consultation with myself and yourself with a proposal to implementation. I really need to move on to the other item. Okay.
I'm not
So,
presenting the recommendations.
can we
move an amendment to the
okay, move your amendment.
Well,
what's your amendment?
The recommendation is that free parking is introduced in Temple Fortune in line with the petition, in line with the request from local traders.
Okay, so that includes the request for Sunday parking to from trade that I've received, or just...
That is just regarding free parking, not regarding other issues.
Okay, fine, okay. Fine, so is that agreed, Councillor? Can you have a seconder of your amendment?
Chair, I don't think this committee can make that decision because it's fees and charges matter for policy and resources.
Oh. So we can only recommend, we can only agree the recommendation. You either agree it or you don't agree it. Okay? We agree to, well, as it says there, yeah. So all in favour of the recommendation tabled? All those against? That's carried. Okay, we've only got 6 minutes left. Which one? Can we agree that TFL, as people have read all the papers, do anyone have an issue with item 10? Cycling's safety action plan. Does anyone have any issues with the recommendations tabled?
Yeah, I do have a quick question. On action 2, I note that there's, the proposed submission is. I just wondered what the rationale was around that was. It's talking about changing require to encourage on the bit about TFL. Requiring the application of world-class cycle standards, in all schemes, it would seem to my mind that if we were having a scheme, we should aspire to have the highest design standards as well. Very quickly.
Just very quickly, the standards being proposed include things like coloured lanes that we have in the past not accepted within Barnet, and inherently that needs to reflect our design standards for highways.
Right.
Just very quickly, Chairman, when we had last had the Labour administration here, we had some of the darkest cycling implementation, with tiny bits of cycle lanes up roads, so 20 yards at a time. It was complete and utter nonsense, and I don't want to go back to that.
Okay, thank you. Is that item agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Now, move on to item 12. I'd just like to say, as I quoted in the press release today, regarding Charter holding a function in the park in August, I commend this particular and all friends of the parks, and this is under very strong chairmanship here, and I agree and support the recommendation of this particular item, and I think they did an excellent job, and I've had various comments and positive comments of improvements within the park. Councillor Old.
Yes, I agree completely with what you're saying. I had cause to go to Charles Hill Park a few weeks ago, somewhere I'd never been before, and it's one of the borough's best kept secrets. It's sort of totally surrounded by residential properties, and it's a really, really good park. Does need some money spent on its footpaths. I know I've had cause to go there because of representations made by a disabled person, and I just wondered if the question of access to the various, there's about 4 entrances as you go around the park, and wheelchair access, particularly the Granville Road entrance, is very, very difficult. So I think it's a wonderful park, but we need to make it a little bit more accessible so that everybody can enjoy it.
Can we agree the recommendation? Excellent. Okay. Work programme. Any comments regarding the work programme under item 13?
Noted, Chair.
Agreed? Thank you. I close the